Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, this is going to be a very nerdy video because we're comparing two incredible sets of PAF replica pickups. Both are made by the same company and both are just beyond premium quality. They are ridiculous pieces of kit. Now this here is my 92 Les Paul Standard, the so-called good wood era of modern Les Pauls. And the pickups that I've had in this guitar for the last few years, which I absolutely adore, are these, the Throbak SLE-101s. Now, if you're into your top shelf PAF replicas, you will have definitely come across Throbak. Jon there is just so nerded out, and everything about his pickups is vintage correct to the nth degree. So these pole screws are custom made for Throbak to get the carbon content of the steel correct, because modern screws don't have the same carbon content as the 50s ones did. They're wound on the vintage original winding machines that Gibson used for PAFs back in the 50s. The wooden spacers are from the correct part of America, as if that makes a difference. The covers are finished by the original company that did them back in the 50s. So everything about these are clones. They're not sound-alikes or kind of loose replicas. They are actual clones of those old PAFs. But I have been on the lookout for another set of Throbaks, and I recently had the opportunity to acquire the pickups that are now in this guitar here. So these are the PG-102s. And they're kind of shooting after that Peter Green type thing. Now, when I bought these, the neck magnet was flipped for the Peter Green sort of quacky, middly outer face thing. I have corrected the neck magnet. It's a great sound. A lot of people love it and use it to great effect. It's just not really for me. So these are now a kind of standard set of PAFs in the middle pickup position. But I wanted to compare these two sets of Throbak pickups today, partly for my own interest to see which I prefer in this guitar and what the sonic differences are, partly because there's no real good demos of the PG-102s on YouTube. There's some with players far more accomplished than me making them sound great, but in terms of sound quality, there aren't many good demos out there, so I wanted to try and create one myself. But also because there are some differences between these two sets of pickups, and I want to see exactly what they are, because in terms of manufacturing, there are some kind of variances. So the DC resistance of the PG-102s is slightly higher than the SLEs. Now I'll put the exact values on screen now, and remember that DC resistance isn't output as such, it's just an indication of how much copper is around the magnets. But the PGs are a tiny bit hotter. There is a magnet difference. The PGs use Alnico 5, the SLEs use Alnico 2, and I think that'll probably be the biggest difference we hear today. But there's two other things about these sets of pickups that really sort of interest me. Firstly, the machines that wound them are slightly different. So the SLE-101s use the Lisona 102 machine for the screw coils, and I forget the name of the machine that wound the slugger coils, but they are different machines. Whereas the PG-102s exclusively use the Lisona 102 for both coils, so we'll have a difference in winding pattern there. But also, possibly not the biggest difference, but the most newsworthy difference, is these aren't an ordinary set of PG-102s. These are a limited edition set that were wound using vintage 1950s coil wire. So the exact same wire off the same wooden spools that Gibson would have used back in the 50s. It was just never used, and it's now been used to make these. So does that make a difference? I have absolutely no idea. And there are other variances too. So any differences I'm going to guess aren't down to the age of the magnet wire, but it's kind of cool to have that old wire in a set of pickups. So what I'm going to do today, folks, is I'm going to plug this guitar into my JTM 45 clone and crank it, and then use the volume controls to get sort of clean, crunch, and classic rock levels of gain. So I'm going to do it all old school just on the guitar, and do a direct comparison of these two sets of pickups. I'm going to keep the setup exactly the same. Now, bear in mind, it might not be the perfect setup for the PG-102s, but if I change it to what I had the SLE-101 set as, then we will hear differences in setup rather than the fundamental differences between the pickups. But I just want to put them alongside. It's not like a shootout as such, it's just a comparison to see how these two sets of pickups are similar and different to each other. So without further ado, folks, here we go. we are, folks. Now, please do comment underneath, let me know what you were hearing today, which set of pickups was your favourite in this guitar, and why. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks down in the comments section. Now, they were closer sounding than I was expecting them to be honest. There really wasn't much in it. But that said, there were a few differences. But they were kind of the differences I was expecting, because the SLE-101s have the Alnico 2 magnets in there, and they're a slightly lower DC resistance. And therefore, they're a kind of earlier PAF set, the kind of 57 gold top, 58 burst type thing. The Alnico 5 magnets with a slightly hotter DC resistance is more of the sort of 59-60 thing, and I associate those later burst sounds with being a little bit more bitey and aggressive and punchy, which is kind of what I was hearing in most of the bits of playing today. The PG-102s had a slight more sort of sizzle on the top end, they were a bit tighter in the low end, but they weren't quite as kind of rounded in the mid-range. So the SLE-101s to me sounded like a really lovely, warm set of early PAFs, and the PGs were that slightly more aggressive later PAF thing. But overall, they were very, very similar. And were we hearing any differences from the new old stock wire in these PG-102s? I have absolutely no idea, but as I said in the intro, it's kind of cool to have that in your pickups, the original wire that would have been used for PAFs back in the day. But those are just my thoughts, folks. Please do comment underneath and let me know yours. I love hearing from you on all this sort of stuff. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a big, big difference when you hit subscribe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.